Hey, I'm Adam, and this is Horizons.forge. Today I will be recreating a scene from Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I have wanted to make a diorama from this series for a long time, and Boylei Hobby Time's latest art challenge gave me the perfect opportunity. The prompt was favorite scenes, and I instantly jumped to the first duel between Rey and Kylo Ren. Now, say what you will about the sequel series as a whole, but it undoubtedly had some great lightsaber duels. I recently took some time off to go on a family vacation and to work on some other projects, as I was honestly feeling slightly burnt out. One thing I struggle with in my day-to-day, whether it be hobbies or my professional life, is scope creep. I always add more than is necessary, or even start with a project that is too large to begin with. This tends to add to the cost and time necessary to complete something, but the quality of the result may not increase parallel to those difficulties. I challenged myself to make a smaller, more intimate diorama, much like how this duel is more stripped down and emotional compared to the flashy, over-the-top duels of the prequel series. I decided to forego the lights, large bases, and resin pours of my previous builds, and make something with a smaller footprint and simpler materials than usual. Anyway, after mixing up this forbidden sundae of paint, Mod Podge, and plaster, I applied it to the whole surface. I used a simple MDF base, some of that cheap packaging foam, and a few plaster rocks I had lying around. This mix was made famous by Boylei Hobby Time and is great for quickly covering pieces like this. I eventually have to come back to this rock outcropping as it really wasn't looking how I wanted it. Fun fact, these tree armatures from Woodland Scenics were among the first hobby purchases I ever made. I used them to make trees for my first D&D campaign. The armatures are pretty plain looking and all have the same layout, so I took the time to chop them up, clean up mold lines, and add bark texture with the dull end of my blade on all of the areas that looked like chopped up plastic. Now, back to that rock I don't like. I mixed up a batch of milliput to fill in the gaps as the paste I made was too thin and didn't fill out the area. After applying it to all the gaps and holes, I used a leftover plaster rock to add some texture that wasn't my fingerprints. I used my pen drill to randomly make holes that I filled with a thick superglue to hold my trees in. I didn't really have a plan for this, I kind of just added them as I saw fit. I did try to use them to fill empty spaces and to use them as a bit of a frame for my models. I found some awesome pre-made Hero Forge models of the main characters of this piece, but I did some modifications to them to make sure they looked a little bit closer to the way they did in this scene. When designing Kylo, I forgot to add his crossguard to his lightsaber, so I added that after the fact by cutting the blade off and adding a piece of styrene. With that modification done, I took everything out to prime it black, and then I brought out the airbrush booth to add some zenithal highlights with a white primer. I never really have a plan for painting, especially terrain, so I generally like to add this zenithal highlight. Whether or not it actually comes through in the end is kind of irrelevant to me, because it really helps me see the details and highlights better, and I know where to apply highlights. I wanted to use this Vallejo texture paste on this diorama since it's much smaller and I won't use up so much of it as I would on a larger piece. I really like being able to grab a jar and start working, but that's not always cost effective. I use this to help fill the seams of the trees and add some texture to the flat areas. Using my airbrush, I kind of just started going to town with random colors in the form of transparent or semi-transparent inks. I like to add purples and magentas to shadows and more yellow toned colors as highlights. I really love using fun colors like this to undershade, and then using a transparent ink to cover over it. It may not seem like it does a lot, but it really adds to the character. Sometimes subtle things like that really make the difference in a piece. I applied this color to the base of all the rocks to give it some kind of separation and to add to the cold feeling. I then slapped a black-brown wash over the whole piece and dabbed away the excess to really bring out the details. Again, adding more undershading with the blue wash helped make the stone look more cold in my eyes. Dry brushing is always one of my favorite steps. It takes airbrush terrain from a flat, smooth piece to a more realistic space, if done correctly. And finally, once applied, it really tends to blend in all of that undershading you did. Since I was going to cover most of this in snow, I didn't want to use too much foliage, and I wanted that to be less green. After dabbing on some PVA glue, I sprinkled on some earth blend foliage from Woodland Scenics. This is a more dead yellow looking grass that I think looks better under snow. I actually got to try something I've always wanted to do, and that was using old dried herbs like thyme and oregano from my pantry to add as like a foliage or dead leaves. It probably would have looked better if I would have blended it first, but I think this actually looks pretty good. It was a charming smell for about 10 minutes, but it had to go. So I sealed it in with some watered down Mod Podge, and that did the trick. So this might have been my simplest paint job yet. I've never really been happy with my painting skills, and I would never call myself a mini painter, but this is a skill that I do want to improve over time. How would you guys feel about me making a video that focused more on the aspect of miniature painting rather than scenery building? Like I would take a piece and paint it to the absolute best of my ability to challenge myself. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you would like to see, because I'd honestly like to try it. I painted both models with Army Painter's speed paint range, which I have a love-hate relationship with. I love how easy it is to get a very quick paint job down on a model, but I don't really like how runny everything tends to be. I lose detail and separation. I actually ended up having to repaint Rey a good 3 or 4 times, as I just couldn't get her outfit correct. I think I eventually got to where I wanted it, but because I was rushing myself, I feel that I worked harder than I needed to if I would have just taken my time initially. Finally, I made a snow paste out of gloss Mod Podge and Snowflock from Woodland Scenics. I found that using the gloss variant makes it look more wet, and applying with the brush is honestly the best way to go. Sometimes this mixture can clump up and look rounded on the edges, but if you use a brush, you can kind of flatten it where it needs to be. sprinkled some dry snow powder over the whole area to give it a more dusty kind of look, and then tried to do some object source lighting with the airbrush. I had to repaint Rey after this since it didn't actually work here. Finally, I hit the edges of the base with black paint and I called this done. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe, and comment. Every little bit helps, and I really appreciate everyone who's taken the time out of their day to watch this video. Thank you again, and may the 4th be with you.